The Great Hall of the Galactic Council was not meant for humans. It was vast, filled with light that shimmered in shifting colors, walls alive with energy patterns that moved like waves. Each seat in the chamber belonged to a species older and far more advanced than humanity. The air was thick with pride and power. Every being there carried the weight of empires that had existed for thousands of years. They ruled the stars long before Earth even learned to send metal into the sky. When the humans arrived, the noise stopped. The soft hum of conversation faded as hundreds of eyes, sensors, and strange luminous organs turned toward them. A small group of humans walked calmly down the center path of the chamber. No armor, no display of weapons, just simple black suits and calm expressions. Their faces gave away nothing, but something about their posture made even the proudest alien delegate uneasy. Whispers began to spread through the rows. Some called them reckless, others called them dangerous. Humanity had risen too fast. In less than a century, they had gone from a single planet to a growing interstellar presence. They had no divine lineage, no ancient knowledge gifted by elder species. Everything they achieved was built by their own hands, through failure, pain, and relentless will. To the Council, that made them unpredictable. At the center of the hall stood the round table of negotiation, glowing faintly with energy. The Council's High Chancellor, a being of pure light encased in crystalline armor, greeted them with a tone that carried both politeness and quiet superiority. "Representatives of Earth," the Chancellor said, "welcome to the Galactic Council. May these talks bring order to this growing situation." The human at the front nodded once. "We are here to listen," the representative said softly. The voice was calm, even friendly, but it echoed in the chamber in a way that made it feel heavier than it should have. The meeting began. The Council had gathered not to celebrate humanity's rise, but to control it. One by one, the alien delegates stood and presented their arguments. They spoke of peace, of stability, of maintaining balance in the galaxy. But between their words was the same message: humanity must be restrained. They spoke as if they were speaking to a child holding a dangerous toy. They reminded everyone that humanity's rapid military and scientific progress could destabilize the galactic order. They demanded that Earth's colonies reduce fleet numbers, that human research on new propulsion systems be shared and regulated, that certain weapons be dismantled under supervision. It was all framed as cooperation, but to anyone who listened closely, it was nothing short of surrender. The human delegation sat quietly, taking notes, saying nothing. The Chancellor spoke again, offering what was called a Treaty for Universal Peace. It listed every restriction in gentle diplomatic language. Humanity would have to sign it to become an official member of the Council. The document was long, detailed, and, if accepted, would turn humanity into a dependent species, bound by laws made by others. The other delegates waited for the humans to protest, but no words came. The humans looked at the glowing treaty displayed before them. They read each line carefully, eyes scanning every detail, faces expressionless. The silence stretched on for so long that even the most patient alien began to shift uncomfortably. Finally, the human representative spoke. "Are these the final terms?" The question was calm, polite, but there was something underneath it, a weight that none of the others could identify. The Chancellor's light flickered slightly. "They are," came the reply. "For the safety of all." The human nodded once, slowly. Understood. No emotion, no resistance. Just that one word. The Council took that as a sign of acceptance. The alien delegates exchanged pleased glances. Some allowed themselves quiet smiles. It was going easier than they had expected. They believed they had finally contained the humans before they became too powerful. After a brief discussion among themselves, the humans requested a short recess to review internally. The Chancellor agreed without hesitation. The humans stood, bowed slightly as custom required, and walked out of the chamber. As soon as the doors closed behind them, the hall filled with chatter. "They'll sign," one alien muttered confidently. "They can't afford to refuse. They're isolated, surrounded by fleets older than their civilization." "Of course," another replied. "Humans are ambitious but not suicidal." The Chancellor said nothing, but the flicker of light from within its crystal body pulsed in a rhythm of satisfaction. The Council had dealt with many young civilizations before. Some resisted at first, but all eventually yielded. Fear of extinction always brought them to obedience. Humanity in the Chancellor's mind was no different. Outside the chamber in the quiet room reserved for humanity's delegation, the air felt different. The humans sat around a simple circular table, smaller and less grand than the one inside, but the atmosphere was far heavier. No one spoke for a moment. Then the first words came. "They think they can leash us." Another voice replied quietly. "They don't understand. They see our weapons, not our history." The group fell silent again, each lost in thought. They knew what was at stake. This wasn't just a treaty, it was the future of their species. To accept these terms meant giving up freedom forever. The Council would control every move Earth made. Every new invention would be under supervision. Every colony would be under watch. Humanity's dream of standing equal among the stars would vanish. But rejecting the treaty meant war. A war against civilizations with fleets that had ruled the void for thousands of years. Against powers who believed they were gods among stars. And yet the humans did not look afraid. They looked determined. They knew something the others didn't. Humanity had faced extinction before, not in space, but at home. They had survived endless conflicts, disasters, and struggles. They were built in chaos, shaped by survival, hardened by centuries of learning the cost of freedom. One of them finally spoke. "If we sign, we lose everything. If we refuse, they'll come for us." "Then we'll make sure they never do," another said. There was no shouting, no anger, no panic, only quiet agreement. Each person at that table understood the weight of what they were about to do. Humanity would not bow. Not here, not ever. Outside, in the grand hall, the council members waited impatiently. The recess had gone longer than expected. A few delegates joked softly about humans being indecisive. Others began to prepare their closing remarks, expecting the humans to return with polite acceptance. They didn't notice that the air in the room felt colder, heavier. Something had shifted. The great doors opened again. The human delegation entered, faces calm as before. The room fell silent instantly. Every eye turned toward them, waiting for the answer. The lead human walked up to the glowing treaty table. The light from it reflected softly off their face. Slowly they reached forward, not to sign, but to close the holographic projection of the treaty. The words vanished into darkness. A long pause followed. Then the human spoke, voice steady and clear. "We appreciate your offer," they said, "but we will not accept these terms." Gasps echoed around the hall. A few delegates leaned forward in disbelief. The Chancellor's light pulsed sharply, almost in anger. "You refuse the Council's guidance?" it demanded. "We refuse submission," the human replied. The words were calm, but they cut through the air like thunder. No threats, no raised tone, just finality. The Chancellor tried to recover its composure. "You must understand. Refusal places your world outside protection. It would be considered a hostile act." The human delegation didn't flinch. The lead representative simply said, "Then so be it." They turned and walked toward the exit. The sound of their footsteps echoed through the vast chamber. No one tried to stop them. The silence was complete. The most powerful beings in the galaxy sat frozen as the humans walked away without fear, without apology. When the doors closed behind them, the hall erupted. Voices shouted over each other. Some demanded sanctions. Others called for fleets to be prepared. But beneath the anger there was something else, a thin layer of fear. Because what unsettled the Council wasn't just the refusal. It was how the humans did it. No bluster, no emotion, just a simple, decisive act. They didn't beg or argue. They didn't even threaten. They simply walked away. And in that moment, the Galactic Council realized something that would haunt them for generations. Humanity was not like the others. They didn't need approval. They didn't seek validation. They didn't fear the old powers. They were something entirely new, something the galaxy was not ready for. The human delegation left the grand chamber without saying another word. Behind them, the massive doors closed with a sound that echoed like thunder across the marble floor. The silence that followed felt endless. The most powerful beings in the galaxy sat frozen, staring at the now empty entrance. They had just witnessed something that had never happened before. Someone walking out of the Galactic Council. For a few moments, no one moved. Then the whispers began, soft at first, then growing into nervous chatter. Some called it madness, others called it courage. A few of the older delegates said it reminded them of ancient rebellions, long before the Council united the stars. But deep down, every one of them felt the same thing, unease. Humanity had just refused the entire galactic system, and they had done it without fear. The High Chancellor tried to regain control. The shimmering light of its body pulsed faster, signaling irritation. "Order," it commanded, voice echoing through the chamber. "Order!" The noise slowly died down. The Chancellor's voice hardened. "Humanity has made its choice. The Council will convene a security meeting immediately. Their refusal cannot go unanswered." One of the elder species spoke up. "You believe they will resist us with force?" The Chancellor paused, thinking. "They cannot stand against the Council. But we must ensure they understand their place before others follow their example." That word, example, hung heavy in the air. The Council feared more than rebellion. They feared inspiration, because if humanity's defiance spread, if other young races started to question the Council's authority, the entire order of the galaxy could crumble. Far from the chamber, the human delegation sat aboard their ship, watching the distant stars through thick glass. The planet beneath them glowed with the light of civilization, a network of cities and towers built by hundreds of alien species. Yet despite all that beauty, it felt cold. These people had just tried to chain humanity under polite words and glowing promises. The ship's engines hummed softly as it prepared for departure. No one spoke for a long while. Finally, one of the humans broke the silence. "They will call us dangerous." "They already have," another replied. "Now they'll prove it." The leader looked out the window, eyes reflecting the stars. "Then we need to be ready. The moment we leave this system, they'll start planning." There was no anger in the voice, only certainty. They knew what was coming. Back in the council hall, messages began to spread through the galactic network. Humanity refuses the treaty. Earth rejects council authority. A new crisis is forming. Within hours, every major system in the galaxy was aware of what had happened. Some called it foolish. Others whispered admiration. A few even dared to hope that maybe, just maybe, someone had finally stood up to the endless control of the Council. In the following days, the Council gathered intelligence from hundreds of observation points near human space. Every report came with the same warning. Human fleets were moving. The movements were organized, precise, silent. They weren't attacking, but they weren't standing still either. Whole sectors went dark from surveillance. Communications that had always been open suddenly shut down. The Council tried to call it defensive preparation, but no one believed that. Humanity was preparing for something. Inside human command centers scattered across their colonies, the mood was steady but serious. They had known this moment would come sooner or later. The day when words would not be enough and choices would have to be made. Engineers worked day and night to refit ships. Scientists reviewed old projects that had been abandoned as too risky. Commanders reviewed routes, supply lines, and defense systems. And across all these efforts ran a single idea: humanity would never kneel. For the first time, the galaxy saw what unity meant for humans. They did not act as separate nations anymore. There were no more rivalries, no borders, no competing flags. They had one goal, one purpose: protect humanity. Everything else came second. In one large command hall deep under the surface of a moon base, dozens of screens showed endless streams of data: ship movements, fleet formations, defense protocols. The room buzzed with quiet activity. Every person there moved with focus and purpose. No one shouted. No one panicked. They all understood the same silent truth: the Council would not let this go. Across the stars, the Council's fleets began to mobilize as well. Massive ships built over centuries drifted from their stations, forming lines that stretched across the void. The Chancellor called it a peacekeeping operation, but everyone knew the truth. It was preparation for war. The old species believed that one demonstration of power would be enough to bring the humans back into line. They couldn't imagine that a young race like humanity could stand against them, but they didn't know humanity well enough. On Earth, people gathered in city squares, watching the skies on massive screens as news spread. There was fear, yes, but also pride. They remembered their past, their struggles, their fights for freedom. They had overcome wars, disasters, and despair before. This was different only in scale. The faces on the screens weren't soldiers. They were explorers, builders, thinkers, people who had chosen to stand for something bigger than survival. For the first time in a long time, every human felt part of the same story. Somewhere in orbit above Earth, a huge station rotated slowly, its hull shining in the sunlight. It was home to humanity's central council. There, in a vast meeting chamber filled with calm voices, decisions were made not out of fear, but out of purpose. The leaders didn't speak of revenge. They spoke of preparation, of defense, of protecting their people and their right to exist without control. Every species in this galaxy believes power means control, one of them said quietly. But for us, power means choice, and we choose to be free. The words echoed across the room. No one clapped, no one cheered. They simply nodded and got back to work. Back in the Galactic core, the Council's intelligence officers monitored every human transmission they could intercept. What they found only deepened their confusion. There were no calls for war, no threats, no propaganda. The humans weren't trying to rally others. They were simply preparing in silence. That silence frightened the Council more than any open defiance could. Weeks passed. Tension spread through every major world. Traders stopped traveling near human space. Patrols went missing. Rumors grew that the humans had created new kinds of ships, faster, quieter, deadlier. Some said they were invisible. Others said they could appear anywhere at any time. The Council dismissed these as myths, but the fear among common citizens was real. Inside human territory, production lines glowed day and night. Factories on Mars, Titan, and beyond turned raw materials into precision tools of defense. Every ship that launched carried more than weapons. It carried a message. Humanity was not backing down. Meanwhile, in secret rooms deep within the Council's core planet, the High Chancellor met with military commanders. The meeting was tense. "We cannot allow them to set a new precedent," the Chancellor said. "If humanity is allowed to defy us, the other young races will follow." But direct conflict could unite them further, one commander warned. "We risk creating an enemy that cannot be controlled." "They are already an enemy," the Chancellor replied sharply. "We will remind them what power truly means." And so the order was given. Surveillance drones were to be sent near human borders. Fleets were to move closer under the excuse of monitoring activity. But even as these commands were issued, doubt crept into the minds of the Council's officers. Something about humanity's silence made them hesitate. The humans weren't panicking. They weren't pleading. They were simply waiting. Across human colonies, life went on. Children played under alien suns. Farmers worked fields on distant planets. Engineers repaired ships. Scientists studied new stars. Humanity didn't stop living just because the galaxy threatened them. That was perhaps their greatest strength. They endured without losing their spirit. At night, in one colony city by the sea, an old man looked at the stars and said softly, "They think they can scare us, but fear has never been enough to stop humans. Not then, not now." Far above, the Council's scouts recorded everything but understood nothing. They saw no signs of weakness, only determination. In the final week before everything changed, a small message appeared on every Council monitor. It came without warning, carried through encrypted human channels that none of their systems could block. The message was simple: negotiation concluded. Humanity will determine its own peace. That single sentence spread through the galaxy like a storm. The Council's members froze as they read it. There was no threat in it, but it felt heavier than any declaration of war. Because the meaning was clear, humans were done asking for permission. In every star system, in every Council fleet, commanders waited for new orders. No one dared to move first. Everyone remembered the way the humans had walked out of the hall calm and silent. That memory stayed like a shadow behind every thought. And somewhere beyond the reach of the Council's eyes, humanity prepared quietly, knowing that the time for words had passed. They didn't plan to start a war, but if one came to them, they would make sure it ended on their terms. The stars above Earth had never looked so quiet. From the surface, they seemed calm and beautiful, but everyone who truly understood what was happening knew the silence was dangerous. The galaxy was holding its breath. Since humanity had walked out of the Galactic Council, the balance of power had started to shift in ways no one could predict. Across the Council worlds, nervous debates filled the air. Every news network, every broadcast station repeated the same question: why had the humans refused? Some said it was pride, others said madness. But deep down, most beings knew the truth. Humanity had seen through the disguise of peace. They had realized the Council's treaty was not an alliance but a chain. Meanwhile, in human space, the mood was completely different. There was no panic, no sign of surrender. Factories burned bright through endless nights. Shipyards orbited every major world, their lights shining like artificial stars. The rhythm of hammers, welders, and engines filled the void. Every human understood what needed to be done. They had to be ready, not because they wanted war, but because they refused to be controlled again. On the main Earth station, a meeting took place in a room that looked out over the curve of the planet. Through the wide windows, the blue oceans shimmered below. Inside, calm voices discussed preparations. They talked about defense grids, fleet coordination, and energy reserves. There was no shouting, no fear. Every decision was made with quiet confidence. Humanity had faced impossible odds before, and they had always survived. This was no different. It was just larger, higher, and farther. A young officer looked at the data streams and said softly, "They're moving fleets near our borders." The words hung in the air for a second before being answered with a simple reply. "Let them come. We will not move first." That was the human way, never to strike without reason, but never to bow. Across the border, the Council fleets were gathering in formation. Massive ships made of gleaming alloys floated like mountains of light. Each one carried the history of civilizations thousands of years old. Their commanders looked at the holograms of human territory with uneasy expressions. None of them had ever faced humans in open combat. But they all remembered the stories, how humans fought when pushed too far, how they turned desperation into strength. The High Chancellor received reports every hour. The humans had activated their defense systems, but they made no aggressive move. "They're waiting," the Chancellor said quietly. "Always waiting, as if they know something we don't." And perhaps they did. Back on Mars, the second home of humanity, the red plains glowed under the light of new dawn. Thousands of workers stood beside half-finished ships that stretched into the sky. These weren't warships in the old sense. They were designed for survival, exploration, and defense. Humanity had learned that the best way to prepare for war was to build for peace, but to build it strong. In underground control centers, maps of the galaxy covered the walls. Every human outpost, every station, every relay point was marked and connected by glowing lines. It looked like a web of light spreading through the dark, a living network of willpower. In one corner, a group of engineers discussed something unusual. They were testing a new kind of drive, one that allowed ships to jump faster than light without leaving a trace. If it worked, human ships could appear anywhere without warning. It wasn't built for attack. It was built for freedom, to move without permission from anyone. News of this development reached the Council soon after. Panic rippled through their ranks. "If they master this," one of the elder races warned, "they will become unstoppable." The Chancellor stayed silent for a long moment before replying, "Then we must stop them before it's too late. But how do you stop a species that doesn't rely on fear?" While the Council argued, humanity continued to work. Every man, woman, and child did their part. Even on distant colonies, people volunteered for defense programs, not because they wanted glory, but because they wanted their children to live free. In classrooms, teachers told stories of old Earth, how humans had once stood together during their darkest times and found hope where there was none. Those stories became the heartbeat of the people. One evening, as the sun set over the Pacific, the first prototype ship of the new fleet lifted from orbit. Its hull shimmered like dark glass, almost invisible against the stars. It was silent, efficient, and alive with power. The humans called it a guardian, not because it was meant to conquer, but because it was meant to protect. When it moved, it left behind a trail of faint blue light, fading like a whisper. From secret outposts near the border, Council drones recorded the launch. The data they sent back caused confusion. The ship's readings didn't match anything known. It wasn't faster. It wasn't larger. But somehow it didn't register properly on their sensors. It was as if it existed in two places at once. The report reached the Chancellor, who read it in silence. "So," it murmured finally, "the humans have begun." Back on Earth, the people watched as the stars brightened in the night sky. News anchors reported rising tension, but also spoke of unity. For the first time in centuries, the human race was no longer divided by nations or politics. They stood together as one world. The decision made in that distant council chamber had united them more than any speech or treaty ever could. Days turned into weeks. The galaxy waited. The council demanded answers, but the humans sent none. They didn't respond to threats or accusations. They didn't explain their actions. They simply continued their quiet preparations as if they knew something greater was coming. Then one night, something unexpected happened. A small fleet of council scouts entered the outer rim of human territory. They claimed it was a routine observation mission, but everyone knew what it really was: a test. They wanted to see how humans would react. The scouts moved slowly, recording every signal, every satellite, every movement. For hours they detected nothing unusual. Then, just as they prepared to turn back, one of the scouts picked up a faint energy reading. A shadow passed across their sensors, and before they could even respond, every system in their ships went dark. For 5 full minutes, the council scouts drifted silently through the void, powerless, blind. Then, as suddenly as it had happened, power returned. All systems restored themselves. But the humans had left a message on every screen. It was short: "Do not test our patience." When the fleet returned to the council's base, no one dared speak for several minutes. The message was clear. Humanity hadn't attacked. They hadn't destroyed anything. But they had shown what they were capable of: total control, executed without violence. The council chamber was in chaos the next morning. The chancellor demanded explanations, the generals demanded action. Some called for war. Others warned that war would be suicide. The old powers had never faced a race that could fight without firing a shot. Meanwhile, humanity stayed silent. Their ships continued to patrol calmly. Their colonies worked, their people lived. It was as if nothing had happened. But inside the council, fear was spreading faster than ever before. Every member species began to reconsider their alliances. If the humans could disable ships with a thought, what else could they do? Rumors grew that humanity had discovered something deeper than technology, something connected to their very nature. Some whispered that humans were evolving faster than any known race. Others said it was something simpler but more terrifying: willpower. Because the galaxy had always believed strength came from power, but humanity showed it came from purpose. As days passed, a strange quietness spread through the stars. The council's fleets held their positions, too afraid to move. Human ships, small and unthreatening on the surface, patrolled their borders with discipline and calm. There were no speeches, no celebrations, just silent understanding. The humans knew the council was watching. The council knew the humans were waiting. And for the first time in galactic history, it wasn't the oldest, most powerful species that others feared. It was the newest one. The one that had come from a small blue planet and walked away from the galaxy's throne room without looking back. On Earth, under the same stars that had witnessed their first steps into the void, humanity stood ready, not because they wanted to rule, but because they had learned something simple and eternal. Freedom is not given, it is chosen, and once chosen, it cannot be taken away. The galaxy had gone quiet again, but this silence was heavier than before. It was not the silence of peace. It was the silence of realization. The council had seen the truth. Humanity was not to be measured by its age or technology anymore. They were something entirely new, something no one had prepared for. Every broadcast, every channel across the stars spoke in whispers about what had happened. The fleets that entered human space had returned without firing a single shot, yet their pride had been shattered. Their systems had been disabled, their power humiliated. Some species called it a miracle. Others called it a warning. But for the first time, no one dared to mock the humans. The council tried to hide the reports, but information moved faster than control. Every corner of the galaxy was alive with curiosity. How had the humans done it? What secret did they hold that could bring mighty fleets to their knees without destruction? Inside the council chambers, the arguments never stopped. "They must have used forbidden energy," shouted one. "No, it's psychological warfare," said another. "They only want us to fear them." But fear was already there, sitting in the heart of every discussion. The council's leadership met behind closed doors, trying to decide their next move. Some demanded retaliation, desperate to prove their dominance again. Others begged for caution. "They don't think like us," said one quiet voice in the room. "They don't act on fear, they plan. Every move they make has meaning." The chancellor remained silent, studying the glowing map of human space. The borders of the human colonies had expanded slightly, not through conquest but through alliances. Small forgotten planets near the rim had chosen to join them willingly. That was what truly worried the Council. Not their technology, not their ships, but the fact that other species were beginning to trust them. For the first time in galactic history, the younger worlds were turning away from the Council's promises and toward humanity. They saw something in humans that the Council had lost long ago: hope. One small world, long neglected by the Council, had already signed a trade pact with Earth. Another sent medical researchers to learn human methods. None of it was forced. Humanity didn't demand tribute or submission. They simply offered help, knowledge, and respect, and that was more powerful than any weapon. On Earth, leaders met in a quiet room overlooking the blue oceans. They watched news from across the galaxy with calm eyes. They knew what was happening, and they knew the weight of it. Humanity had not asked to be seen as powerful, but the moment they stood for themselves, the entire galaxy had turned to watch. Still, they refused arrogance. They focused on growth, on stability, and on protection, not just for themselves, but for anyone who asked for safety. In orbit, new space stations were being completed. They were not military outposts, but research centers. Scientists from allied worlds came to study beside humans. They worked together, shared data, and learned from each other. For the first time in history, true cooperation across species had begun, and it was happening under humanity's guidance. But far away, the Council couldn't accept that. Their pride was too deep, their image too fragile. The Chancellor knew that if they didn't regain control soon, their authority would collapse completely. So they formed a secret division, one that would never appear in records. Their mission was simple: infiltrate human systems and uncover their true strength. If possible, disrupt it. A small group of elite ships equipped with stealth systems slipped across the borders one silent night. Their goal was to gather data and return unnoticed. But the moment they crossed the edge of human territory, something strange happened. Their communication signals blurred. Navigation systems flickered. The stars outside the viewports dimmed as though the universe itself was watching. Then a calm voice filled the cabin. "You are entering restricted space. Identify your intent." The commander of the infiltration team froze. They had been invisible, completely undetectable. How did the humans know they were there? They didn't answer. They simply turned back, and just like that, their ships powered down one by one. Engines dead. Lights off. Systems frozen. Moments later, the power returned, and they found themselves drifting at the very edge of their own borders again. It was as if space itself had moved them back. The mission was over before it began. When the report reached the Council, disbelief spread. The Chancellor stared at the data. They didn't destroy them. They didn't even harm them. They just returned them. That terrified the Council more than anything. The humans didn't need to prove violence. Their restraint was their power. Meanwhile, on a moon near Saturn, a group of engineers watched the distant stars. One of them spoke quietly. "Do you think they'll try again?" The others nodded. "Of course they will. But we'll be ready." They didn't sound angry. They sounded focused. Humanity had stopped seeing itself as prey long ago. Now they were guardians of their own destiny, and they intended to protect it no matter who challenged them. Weeks turned into months. The galaxy adjusted slowly to the new balance. Trade routes changed. Old alliances faded. The Council's influence weakened. Yet even with their power slipping, the Council refused to admit defeat. They planned one last move, a final attempt to regain their lost control. At a grand meeting that stretched for days, they debated every possible approach. One side wanted negotiation, another demanded war, and others feared both. But in the end, pride won. The Chancellor announced, "We will call them to one last negotiation. They must understand their place." The message was sent to Earth. It was polite, carefully worded, filled with false respect. They invited humanity to a final conference to ensure lasting peace. The humans accepted. When the news broke, the galaxy held its breath. Every being knew this meeting would decide the future of the stars. Would there be peace, or would the galaxy fall into chaos? On the day of the conference, the Council's chamber was filled once again with the familiar faces of power. Delegates stood tall, pretending confidence while their minds raced with fear. Then the doors opened. The human delegation entered, calm and steady. Their expressions were unreadable, their steps unhurried. They took their seats without a word. For several minutes, silence ruled. Finally, the Chancellor spoke. "We are here to restore balance. The galaxy cannot survive if one species acts beyond its role." One of the humans looked up slowly. "And who decides that role?" The question hit the chamber like a wave. No one answered. The humans continued. "For centuries, the Council ruled with fear. You controlled through intimidation, through power. That time is over. The galaxy has seen your methods. Now it will see another way." The Chancellor's tone turned sharp. "You threaten the unity of the stars." "No," the human said calmly. "We offer real unity, one built on respect, not fear." Every delegate in the room felt the shift. It wasn't just words, it was conviction. The humans spoke with quiet certainty, and that certainty broke the Council's confidence more than any weapon could. When the meeting ended, the humans stood, bowed politely, and left. No demands, no insults, just quiet dignity. As the doors closed behind them, a long silence filled the room. No one dared to speak first. The Chancellor finally whispered, "They didn't agree to our terms." Another delegate replied, "No, they made their own." Across the galaxy, the news spread faster than light. Humanity had walked out again, leaving the Council speechless. But this time, it was not an act of defiance, it was an act of declaration. They had chosen independence, and the galaxy understood. Many worlds celebrated quietly. For the first time, they saw a future not ruled by fear, a future where even the smallest planet could stand tall. On Earth, there were no celebrations. Just calm work, just purpose. Humanity didn't crave applause. They simply looked at the stars, knowing that everything had changed forever. Because now the galaxy no longer saw humans as one species among many. They saw them as something entirely different. Guardians of balance, protectors of choice, and reminders of what true strength really meant. And somewhere in the vast darkness, where Council fleets once drifted proudly, the faint light of a human ship passed quietly among the stars, watching, learning, and waiting, not for war, not for revenge, but for the day the galaxy would finally understand that power wasn't about control. It was about restraint, and humanity had mastered it. After the humans walked out of the chamber for the second time, the great doors of the Galactic Council stayed open, but no one dared to pass through them. The silence inside was heavy. No one argued, no one raised their voice. They all just sat there, stunned by what had happened. It wasn't that the humans had threatened them. It was that they hadn't needed to. Their calm words had carried more weight than any fleet or weapon ever could. The Chancellor stared at the empty seats where the humans had sat only minutes ago. The echo of their last words still lingered in the air. "We offer real unity, one built on respect, not fear." The sentence repeated again and again in their mind. It sounded simple, yet it carried a power the Council had never known. When the meeting finally ended, most of the delegates left without speaking. Some looked angry, others frightened, but a few, just a few, looked thoughtful. Those were the ones who understood what had truly happened that day. The galaxy had just changed direction, and no one could stop it now. Outside, on the vast balcony that overlooked the shining stars, the Chancellor stood alone. They looked out at the thousands of lights that marked the worlds under the Council's control. Once those lights had brought comfort. Now they only brought doubt. For the first time, the Chancellor felt what so many other species had felt under their rule: uncertainty. And in that moment, they realized something painful but true. The humans had not defeated the Council with power. They had defeated them with truth. Across the galaxy, the news spread faster than light. Humanity walks out again. Council power crumbles. New era begins. Every world had its own version of the story, and every version carried the same message. Humanity had changed everything. In small settlements on forgotten planets, people cheered quietly. In cities that had once feared the Council, people looked to the sky with new hope. Even on distant moons far from human space, children spoke of the species that stood up to the most powerful rulers in existence and simply walked away. But on Earth, life continued as usual. No parades, no speeches. The people didn't see themselves as heroes or conquerors. They saw themselves as survivors who refused to be controlled. Factories still ran, farmers still worked, teachers still taught. Humanity kept moving forward, one step at a time, just as they always had. In orbit, the human fleet drifted silently near the blue planet. Its ships were no longer symbols of fear, but of protection. They stood guard not only over Earth, but over the idea that freedom should never be negotiated away. Within one of the command stations, screens glowed with signals from across the galaxy. Reports came in every hour. New worlds requesting contact, others asking for help, and a few seeking alliances. Humanity responded to each one with care and respect. They didn't demand loyalty. They offered cooperation. That was the quiet secret of their strength. They didn't rule. They inspired. Meanwhile, within the Council, confusion turned into desperation. Old alliances began to fall apart. Species that had once obeyed now questioned orders. Trade partners refused unfair deals. Even longtime allies began to say the same thing. If humans can stand alone, why can't we? The Chancellor called for an emergency meeting. The great chamber filled again, but this time the energy was different. There was no pride left, only fear and doubt. "We must restore order," the Chancellor said, voice trembling slightly. "If we lose control, chaos will follow." One delegate stood and replied, "Order built on fear is not order, it's chains. And you can't chain a galaxy forever." The words echoed through the hall, and the Chancellor knew it was over. The Council had lost the one thing that truly kept it together: belief. The galaxy no longer believed in them. Weeks passed and new alliances formed. Small groups of worlds joined together under a new banner called the Union of Free Systems. It wasn't led by the humans, but inspired by them. They believed in fairness, cooperation, and shared strength, and though humanity never claimed ownership, their influence guided everything. Back on Earth, people watched the changes with quiet pride. They knew what was happening, but they didn't boast. They simply continued building, inventing, and exploring. Humanity's focus was no longer just survival, it was progress. In a research facility orbiting Mars, scientists worked on a new kind of engine, one that could reach the farthest edges of the galaxy faster than ever before. "We'll see how far hope can travel," one of them said softly, watching the prototype hum to life. And somewhere deep in human space, far beyond the borders of the Council's reach, new colonies began to grow, not as empires but as homes, each one built on cooperation with the species that chose to join them. On one of those colonies, a child from a distant alien race played alongside human children under a bright artificial sun. None of them cared about politics or power. To them, the stars were not lines of control. They were just places waiting to be explored together. That was the world humanity had dreamed of. And now it was slowly becoming real. Yet in the shadows of the Council's capital, not everyone accepted the change. A few leaders refused to let go of the old ways. They gathered in secret, whispering plans of restoring the old order. But even among them, fear lingered. "Can we ever fight them?" one asked. The answer came quietly. "We don't even understand them." They all knew what that meant. Humanity had grown beyond control, not because of weapons, but because of unity. In time, the Council's power faded completely. The great chamber that had once ruled the stars turned into a place of memory. Some said it was poetic, that the same hall where humanity had walked out twice became the symbol of a new age. But for the humans, history was just one more lesson. They didn't build monuments to their defiance. They built schools, hospitals, and research stations. They believed that true strength was not shown by walking away. It was shown by what they built afterward. Years later, a new council was formed, not of rulers, but of representatives from every free world. Humanity joined, not as conquerors, but as equals. The first meeting was quiet and respectful. No one raised their voice. No one spoke of power. They spoke of balance, protection, and progress. At the center of the new chamber hung a symbol, a single shining circle surrounded by smaller lights, representing every world. Below it were simple words written in hundreds of languages. Respect is strength. It was humanity's gift to the galaxy. On a quiet evening back on Earth, as the sun dipped below the horizon, a small group of people stood watching the stars. They knew that somewhere out there, millions of beings were now free to live without fear, and all of it had started when humanity stood up, spoke calmly, and walked away. The wind carried the sound of the ocean, and one of them whispered, "We didn't conquer the stars. We taught them how to breathe again." The stars above glimmered like they were listening. And somewhere out in that endless sea of light, human ships drifted silently, not as warriors, but as guardians. They didn't watch with suspicion, but with care. They knew that peace wasn't something you achieved once and forgot. It was something you protected every single day. The galaxy had learned something humanity had always known. Real strength doesn't come from control. It comes from choice. And so as the stars continued to turn and the planets continued to spin, the story of humanity spread across every corner of the cosmos, not as a tale of war or conquest, but as the moment when the galaxy learned to stand tall. From that day on, every being who looked up at the night sky remembered the same truth. The day the humans walked out, the galaxy finally learned what it meant to be free. The great doors of the Galactic Council stood closed once again, but this time no one dared to speak of reopening them. Since the day humanity walked out, silence had taken root across the galaxy. That silence was not peace, it was fear wearing the mask of calm. Every species in the Council could feel it. Something had changed, and it could not be undone. The Council's fleet still orbited near the human border, engines idle, weapons cold. They were waiting for orders that never came. The commanders didn't want to move. Every time they looked into the dark between the stars, they felt watched. They had all seen the report from the scout fleet, the one that returned silent and shaken. No one could explain how their ships had been disabled without a shot fired. The humans had done it quietly like it was easy. That single act had changed the way the galaxy saw them. Inside the council chamber, the tension grew heavier with each passing day. The High Chancellor stood before a vast holographic display, showing the border between council and human space. The human colonies glowed as bright points of light across the black expanse. Around them, countless council worlds formed a ring of power, yet the Chancellor's voice held unease. "They're expanding their network," it said, voice low but sharp. "Communication relays, defense platforms, supply routes. Everything is strengthening." One of the elder delegates responded nervously. "They said they want peace. Maybe they are only protecting themselves." "Protecting?" the Chancellor snapped. "From what?" "We haven't attacked," another delegate spoke softly. "Not yet." That silence that followed said everything. Everyone knew it was only a matter of time. Far away on the edge of human space, things looked different. There was no fear in the air, only focus. The people worked tirelessly, repairing ships, building outposts, and training. Every effort was organized, calm, and filled with purpose. The humans didn't rush. They didn't boast. They simply prepared. In a massive hangar on a moon orbiting one of Earth's outer colonies, engineers moved between glowing panels, checking every detail of the new defense fleet. The ships were smaller than the Council's giants, but far more efficient. Their hulls were dark, absorbing light instead of reflecting it. To an observer, they looked like shadows drifting through space. These weren't built to conquer, they were built to endure. Humanity had learned long ago that survival came not from size, but from adaptability. Each vessel could act alone or as part of a swarm, reacting faster than any enemy could plan. Inside one of those ships, the atmosphere was quiet, but intense. A soft hum filled the air as the crew ran silent tests. Every person aboard knew the importance of what they were doing. They weren't just defending Earth. They were defending the right of every human to make their own choices. Outside, the vastness of space stretched endlessly, filled with stars that seemed peaceful and distant. But every human looking at those stars knew the truth. Peace never lasted long when power felt threatened. On Earth, people continued their daily lives.
Children went to school.
Farmers grew crops. Artists painted the same stars that had once belonged only to dreams. But even in those quiet moments, everyone felt the same silent understanding, that the world was preparing for something larger than any one person could imagine. News from the Council reached the public through intercepted transmissions. Some messages spoke of containment strategies, others of necessary control. These words only strengthened humanity's resolve. They knew what the Council was planning even before the fleets moved. Humanity had always known how to read between the lines. On the far side of the galaxy, a council meeting grew heated. The Chancellor demanded that immediate action be taken. "They are building too quickly," it said. "If we wait, they will become untouchable." But one of the younger species, whose world had once been conquered by the Council long ago, finally spoke up. Maybe they deserve to be untouchable. Maybe they've earned it. Gasps filled the room. The idea of questioning the council was unthinkable. But the thought had already spread. If humanity could stand against them, maybe others could too. The Chancellor realized it then. The humans hadn't just defied them. They had changed the galaxy's mindset. The seed of rebellion had been planted without a single battle. While the council argued, humanity continued to act. They knew words meant little compared to preparation. New stations were built near asteroid belts, turning raw rock into materials faster than ever before. Scientists created energy shields capable of surviving direct hits from the largest council weapons. But perhaps the most important thing was not what they built. It was how they built it. Every design, every ship, every shield came from cooperation. No single nation or company claimed ownership. Humanity worked as one, united not by fear but by will. In one quiet laboratory orbiting the outer rim, a group of researchers worked on something secret. A device that could bend communication signals, allowing human fleets to vanish from scanners completely. They tested it on a small drone, sent it into the void, and watched as every sensor failed to detect it. For a moment, the drone seemed to disappear from existence. When they brought it back, there were no cheers, only quiet pride. They didn't need celebration. They knew what they were building would protect generations to come. The council eventually learned of these advancements through spies and informants. Panic swept through their ranks once again. "They've surpassed our understanding," one delegate whispered. "They've evolved faster than we predicted." The Chancellor's light dimmed. "Then we must remind them who rules the stars." And so the council fleets began to move. Thousands of ships turned toward human space, engines glowing with burning energy. It was meant to be a show of power, a reminder that the galaxy still belonged to the ancient species. But even as their ships advanced, something unexpected happened. Human ships didn't scatter. They didn't hide. They simply formed a silent formation waiting in the dark. When the council fleets entered the outer edges of human territory, they were greeted by a single transmission. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't even a warning. It was a voice, steady, calm, and unmistakably human. "This is human space. You are entering without consent. Turn back." The council commanders laughed at first. They had numbers on their side, technology older than human civilization itself. They believed it would be an easy show of force, but as they advanced, their scanners began to glitch. Ships that had appeared clear on their radar suddenly vanished. Signals scrambled. Their formations broke without a single shot being fired. Panic spread through their ranks. They had seen this before. The same invisible interference that had struck the scout fleet weeks ago. Only this time it was everywhere. Then the voice returned. "You wanted to see what we've built. Now you have." In that moment, hundreds of council ships lost control of their systems. Not destroyed, not damaged, just powerless. Their weapons shut down, engines silenced. The human fleet remained still, no aggression shown. They had made their point again. Complete control through calm precision. After several minutes, the council ships regained power. Their commanders ordered a retreat, shaken by what they had just witnessed. When they reported back, the council hall fell into chaos. Some called for negotiation, others called for war. The Chancellor stared at the projection of Earth on the display. "How can a species so young do this?" it asked. No one answered. Back on Earth, humanity didn't celebrate. They simply continued to work. The people knew that the galaxy would not forgive humiliation easily. They had shown restraint, not weakness. They had shown control, not arrogance. In cities, people went on with their lives knowing that somewhere above, the fleet stood ready. Humanity had learned to defend itself not through fear, but through unity. The council had expected a reaction of pride or anger. Instead, they found something they could not understand: discipline. In the months that followed, rumors spread through every corner of the galaxy. Some said the humans had created invisible ships. Others claimed they could control energy itself. But the truth was simpler. Humans had mastered coordination. Every person, every ship, every plan worked together like one mind. And that was something no ancient empire could match. By the time the council realized it, it was too late. Humanity had already established its place among the stars, not by ruling others, but by showing that they could not be ruled. And in the quiet of space, far beyond the council's reach, human ships drifted calmly through the dark, watching, waiting, and ready, because they knew the galaxy would test them again. And when that day came, humanity would answer, not with fear, not with rage, but with the same unshakable calm that had carried them this far. They had walked away once from the most powerful beings in existence. And now, even those beings could not look at the stars without seeing the reflection of a human standing tall in the darkness, silent, patient, and utterly unbroken.